doing and hear a little word of grace. This week, I want to talk about something called code switching. Have you heard of that? It's the phenomenon wherein one switches languages while talking with another person. It was first brought up when someone noticed how indigenous persons in California would sprinkle in several languages amid one conversation. However, when we talk about it in a sort of non-academic setting and just normal everyday life, code switching means how we talk to suit our context. It's how someone who's black will speak differently in a room full of white people than in a room full of black people. It's how you'll check your language when you're around your grandmother a lot more than when you're around your childhood friends. It's how your kids will hear you talk one way, but your boss will hear you talk a different way. We code switch or change our language to suit the people we are around. It's so we're heard. It's so we're understood. It's so the people we are with will feel comfortable. The fact that we have to code switch, that we're sort of forced to, could and probably does imply a power imbalance, that we'll have to modify how we talk so that we fit in and don't get in trouble. But in another sense, code switching is a way of being hospitable to other people to make them feel comfortable. It's something we do on purpose. So, you know who else code switches? Jesus. When he first called his first disciples, he was calling fishermen. Andrew, Peter, James, and John, they all made their living on the Galilean Sea, hauling in nets filled with fish. It was a hard, blue-collar life dependent on forces beyond their control. So Jesus called them in a way they would understand. Come follow me, he said, and I'll show you how to fish for people. Sometimes we try to make more out of this sentence, like we're supposed to cast a wide net and try and haul in as many people as we can. We globalize Jesus' words to include everyone, imagining he's calling every last person to the ministry of fishing for people. I think he's just using their language. He's describing what he's calling them to in ways that they can understand. Jesus is code switching, so they'll be comfortable and follow. They're going to catch people for God's kingdom like they catch fish. And I like to imagine if he called carpenters, he'd use the language of crafting. If he called mechanics, he'd use the language of motors. If he called teachers, he'd use the language of lesson plans. If he called bankers, he'd use the language of finance. You see where I'm going here. Jesus isn't going to call us in ways we don't understand. This is probably why Peter told the Corinthians if someone was going to speak in tongues, there needed to be an interpreter present. Jesus speaks the language intrinsic to us as individuals, calling us to a ministry that brings the kingdom to those around us. Jesus code switches because he is hospitable, wanting to invite us into what he is already doing. Jesus himself is God's code switch because Jesus is the Word made flesh. And yes, he will make us uncomfortable with his words and actions that challenge the status quo in a fallen world. A ministry hell-bent on defeating sin and death in all its forms will do that when we've grown accustomed to how those forms benefit us. But if he spoke to the fishermen in ways they could understand, he will do the same for you. And if you're having trouble hearing, that's one thing pastors are good for. Thanks for joining me for this week's devotion. I hope you heard a word of grace that Jesus will speak to you in ways that you can understand, and he sends others to help us understand that too. If you like what you heard, please like and share it with someone who you think needs to hear this good news. You're invited to join us on worship on Sunday morning at 10:30. We join in person here in Fulton or online, but if not, our benediction is the same as always. God be with you till we meet again.